Good evening, welcome to Scotland at 7 with me, Gordon Ross. It's the 11th of February. First of all, the coronavirus update. And as of 2 o'clock today, a total of 1,613,575 people in Scotland have now been tested through NHS Scotland labs and UK Government's regional testing centres since the beginning of the pandemic. Of these, 1,424,400 were confirmed negative. 189,175 have tested positive. There are 830 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. This will be an underestimate of the number of cases. Not everyone with the virus will display symptoms, and not all those with symptoms will be tested. There were 48 new reported deaths of people who have tested positive. The number of patients in Scotland who died from complications caused by the coronavirus COVID-19 infection now stands at 6,599. This number only includes those who have died after receiving a positive test for the virus in the previous 28 days. Of the people who have tested positive, 1,499 were in hospital last night, 109 of whom were in intensive care. As of 8 a.m. this morning, 1,048,747 people had received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccination, and 13,195 had received their second dose. 63,178 is a new record for the number of vaccinations done in one day. The latest daily UK figures published today show that 114,851 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 678 since yesterday. The number refers to deaths in all settings and not just hospitals. And now to tonight's main stories. A 21st poll has shown a majority in support for Scottish independence. The SNP has said that Scotland's future must be in Scotland's hands, not Boris Johnson's, as a 21st poll in a row shows a majority support for independence. The poll by Savanta Comres, published today and conducted between the 4th and the 9th of February, has support for independence at 53% among those expressing an opinion. The poll also found a majority of people would vote SNP in the Scottish Parliament elections, with support for the SNP at 54% in the constituency ballot and 43% in the regional ballot. Commenting, the SNP Deputy Leader Keith Brown MSP said, "With 21 consecutive polls showing a majority support for independence, it's clear that Scotland's future must now be in Scotland's hands, not Boris Johnson's. People in Scotland have the right to decide their own future in a post-pandemic referendum. The issue will be at the very heart of the election in May, and will be who has the right to decide what sort of economy we should be after the pandemic, the people of Scotland or Boris Johnson." And now Brexit, apparently, is going to cost, the cost of Brexit, I beg your pardon, will be 4 times greater for the UK than it is for the European Union. The economic blow dealt by Brexit will be 4 times greater in the UK than the EU, according to the latest forecast by Brussels. A month into the new relationship, the European Commission said that the UK's exit on terms agreed by Boris Johnson's government would generate a loss in gross domestic product by the end of 2022, with about 2.5% in the UK compared with continued membership. In contrast, the hit for the EU is estimated to be about 0.5% over the same period. Equivalent to lost economic output worth more than £40 billion over 2 years, the Commission said that although the worst damage had been avoided thanks to the 11th hour trade deal signed in December, substantial barriers to trade still remained and would come with a heavier cost for Britain. Whilst the free trade agreement improves the situation as compared with an outcome with no trade agreement between the EU and the UK, it cannot come close to matching the benefits of the trading relations provided by EU membership, the Commission said in its winter economic forecast. Most mainstream economists have already forecast that Brexit will deliver a bigger hit to the UK economy than to the EU. However, the figures compiled by the Commission mark the first official EU estimates made since the deal was agreed. The forecast comes as the UK government comes under mounting pressure over delays to cross-border trade after a month of the new rules, with business groups warning that further disruption is expected as more new border checks come into force later this spring. The deal agreed between London and Brussels included maintaining zero taxes on the sale of goods across borders between the UK and the EU. However, businesses have faced additional costs and delays from new paperwork, customs checks, and confusion over the new system. And further Brexit news. The Brexit blow to financial services is, I beg your pardon, I'll read that again. There's a Brexit blow to financial services as the UK loses business to Europe. The SNP has said that Boris Johnson's botched Brexit deal is harming the whole economy, as Amsterdam surpassed London as Europe's largest share trading centre, as the UK loses business to the EU following Brexit. Details from the CBOE Europe, reported in today's Financial Times, shows that 9.2 billion euros worth of shares per day were traded in Amsterdam in January, and more than a fourfold increase, whilst trading in London fell significantly to 8.6 billion euros. It follows a ban on EU-based financial institutions trading in London following Boris Johnson's Brexit deal, which saw London immediately lose £6.5 billion of deals to the EU when the transition period ended on the 31st of December. It comes amid warnings from the Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey that Britain could be locked out of the EU banking market after Boris Johnson took Britain out of the EU single market and failed to secure a deal on financial services. A poll from YouGov found that 62% of Scots think that Brexit has gone badly since the transition period ended. And now to fishing. And Scottish fishing chiefs have slammed the Brexit deal negotiated by Boris Johnson, describing it as an extremely disappointing deal which falls far short of what the UK government had committed to the industry. Giving evidence to Holyrood's Culture, Tourism, Europe and External Affairs Committee, Elspeth MacDonald, the Chief Executive of the Scottish Fishermen's Federation, said that Boris Johnson's claims on a visit to Scotland in January that there would be a 25% increase in overall quota was misleading. And for some of these species, we will actually have less fishing opportunity than we had previously, and that will leave us worse off. Asked whether the fishing industry feels betrayed by the UK government, she said, "We feel very badly let down. We feel that the government made repeated promises and commitments to the industry, and these were not met." The Chief Executive Officer of the Scottish Seafood Association, Jimmy Buchan, warned, "We've ended up with the worst of the worst of the worst," and said that the UK government's compensation scheme doesn't go far enough. There have been calls on Michael Gove to secure a grace period as Brexit warnings mount. The SNP has ramped up calls on the UK government to urgently secure a grace period to protect businesses and jobs from the damage of Brexit bureaucracy, ahead of a crucial meeting between Michael Gove and the European Commission's Vice President, Maros Šefčovič, this evening. It comes as seafood exporters warned that new post-Brexit importing rules due to come into force in April could deliver yet another blow to firms and lead to price rises and food shortages. James Withers, the CEO of Scotland Food and Drink, warned that there's no sign of any improvement soon. He added, "In fact, there are many signs that things could get worse." Ahead of the new rules, Withers said, "Those checks, when they're put in place, could also make things slow, more expensive and a lot more complex for EU businesses who need to sell products into businesses here." And meanwhile, the managing director of Charles Stamper Fruit and Veg, Louise Stamper, issued a dire forecast that one thing for certain is that prices will go up. And Jim Kaminsky, the chief executive of food wholesaler Fairleigh Group, said that people seem to think that you can just switch the lights back on and everything's going to be back to normal. That's not going to happen in this industry. It's going to take years of recovery. Separately, a survey of 470 UK-based firms by the British Chambers of Commerce found that nearly half, 49% of exporters were struggling to adapt to new trading rules and facing higher costs post-Brexit. And now the UK government has been urged to follow Scotland's lead on COVID border controls. The SNP has again urged the United Kingdom government to follow Scotland's lead and to bring in supervised quarantine for all new arrivals to the UK. This week, the Scottish Government announced that all arrivals to Scotland from outside the common travel area must book and pay for managed isolation in quarantine hotels to protect against the risks of the new strains of COVID-19 coming into the country from the 15th of February. The UK Government's plan is to introduce hotel quarantine for people arriving from countries only on the red list. However, public health experts have said that this plan is leaky and that a total blanket hotel quarantine policy across all countries is a better idea. Apparently, refusal to act worsens the UK's debt crisis. New figures are pointing to a worsening debt crisis in the UK, which is actively pushing more people to food banks and into poverty and widening the UK's inequalities gap. According to the Financial Conduct Authority, 14.2 million UK adults have low financial resilience, meaning that they are over-indebted or have low levels of savings. Before the pandemic, this figure was just 10.7 million. The FCA's research also revealed that the economic impact of COVID-19 has split the UK in two. While millions of people are struggling to get by, with younger people and black and African minority ethnic adults disproportionately affected by the crisis, 48% of adults said it hasn't affected them financially. 1 in 7, or 14%, have actually seen an improvement in their finances in the past year. The SNP said today that they have repeatedly called on the UK government to make the universal credit uplift permanent and to extend it to legacy benefits, to extend the furlough for as long as necessary, to increase and extend sick pay, and to bring in financial coronavirus support for the 3 million excluded to put more money into people's pockets. Commenting, the SNP's Shadow Chancellor Alison Hewlish MP said, "The Chancellor cannot turn his back and ignore these staggering figures, or the stark warnings from anti-poverty campaigners, businesses and the self-employed that the UK government must bring in policies that save jobs and put money into people's pockets." And there's to be an investigation into the conditions in barracks housing refugees in the United Kingdom. Immigration and prison inspectors are to go into military accommodation being used to house asylum seekers after significant pressure from campaigners and MPs. The Independent Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration had initially announced a broader inquiry into the Home Office use of hotels and barracks as contingency accommodation and was intending to conduct the investigation remotely. But the ICIBI has now said that it will send in inspectors on Monday to the two former military sites, Napier Barracks in Kent and Penally Camp in Pembrokeshire, and it has enlisted the assistance of HM Prison Inspectorate. Charities, healthcare professionals, lawyers and MPs have all called for independent scrutiny of the operation of the sites. Napier and Penally, which have held up to 600 men between them since September, have been dogged by allegations of cover-ups, poor access to healthcare and legal advice, and crowded conditions. Plaid Cymru's Westminster leader Liz Saville-Roberts said, "The Home Office has been evasive and dismissive ever since Plaid Cymru began raising questions about Penally in September. I therefore welcome the Chief Inspector's decision to conduct inspection visits at the site." Claire Mosley, the founder of the charity Care for Calais, which has been assisting the men at the site, said, "We're pleased to see that inspectors will be visiting the sites themselves, and in particular that they will be talking to the residents so that their voices can be heard." Now to news from Ireland. The Irish president has attacked feigned amnesia over British imperialism. Ireland's president, Michael D. Higgins, has made a sharp critique of British imperialism and the feigned amnesia of academics and journalists who refuse to address its legacy. Writing in The Guardian, Higgins accuses unnamed academic and media organisations of turning a blind eye to the devastating impact of colonialism, not just in Ireland, but across the world. A feigned amnesia around the uncomfortable aspects of our shared history will not help us to forge a better future together, he says, contrasting British forgetfulness with Ireland's reflections on its war of independence and partition a century ago. Ignoring the shadows cast by our shared past are wider part of a reluctance to engage with imperial legacy, says Higgins, who occupies a largely ceremonial post. His article comes in advance of a seminar on imperialism, which he is to host on the 25th of February. "I'm struck by a disinclination," he says, "in both academic and journalistic accounts to critique empire and imperialism. Openness to and engagement with a critique of nationalism has seemed greater. And while it has been vital to our purposes in Ireland to examine nationalism, doing the same for imperialism is equally important and has a significance far beyond British-Irish relations." Imperial powers use a mask of modernity for cultural suppression, economic exploitation, dispossession and domination, says Higgins. Those on the receiving end of imperialistic adventurism are denied cultural agency, assumed to be incapable of it, and responsible for a violence towards the modernising forces directed at them. British imperialists did not recognise the Irish as equals, he says. At its core, imperialism involves the making of a number of claims which are invoked to justify its assumptions and practices, including its inherent violence. One of those claims is the assumption of superiority of culture. And now to the United States and the Trump impeachment trial. As the third day of Donald Trump's Senate impeachment trial got underway today, the Democrats are making the case for his conviction for inciting a deadly rampage at the US Capitol are set to focus on the damage wrought in the rampage and the former president's role in inflaming the rioters. Yesterday, Democrats revealed disturbing new recordings of the mob attack on the US Capitol last month as they presented their case for a historic second impeachment trial of Donald Trump. The House impeachment managers constructed a timeline which they said showed that the former president was singularly responsible for the deadly assault, which brought a violent mob within footsteps of the nation's political leaders. Senators seated as jurors in the chamber, that was the scene of the invasion on the 6th of January, watched silently as the security videos and police dispatches painted a fuller picture of the afternoon. The dramatic scene showed rioters rampaging through the halls of Congress, searching for the then Vice President Mike Pence and the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Members of the far-right extremist groups were amongst the first to enter the Capitol, some wore tactical gear, others were armed. In previously unreleased security footage, Pence, who had been presiding over a session to certify Biden's victory, and his family were seen being evacuated from a room near the Senate chamber nearly 15 minutes after rioters breached the Capitol. Chants of "Hang Mike Pence" reverberated through the marbled building, while outside others constructed a makeshift gallows. At one point, the mob came within 100 feet of the room where Pence was sheltering, the managers said. The Capitol police officer Eugene Goodman was seen in another extraordinary video, leading Senator Mitt Romney away from the rioters, potentially saving his life. In another recording, senators are rushed from the building, narrowly missing the insurrectionists by just 58 steps. Romney, one of Trump's most frequent Republican critics, told reporters he had no idea he had been so close to danger. Concluding the arguments for the day, the impeachment manager, Joaquin Castro, a congressman from Texas, revisited that moment on the evening of the 6th of January when he and his colleagues, still shaken from the violence, came back to the Capitol to ensure that the will of the American people finally prevailed. And now to other news. There is to be support for freelancers and the events sector. A further £17.5 million of emergency coronavirus COVID-19 funding has been allocated to support creative freelancers and the events sector. Of that, £8.5 million will go towards the events sector, distributed through the Pivotal Event Business Fund and the Events Industry Support Fund 2, as well as targeted support, bringing the total additional COVID-19 support for the events sector to £31.5 million. The remaining £9 million will be distributed as a top-up to the Creative Freelancers Hardship Fund, bringing the total level of support for creative freelancers to £17 million. This support is in addition to the more than £125 million of additional funding which the Scottish Government has so far allocated to culture, historic environment and events since the start of the pandemic. And that's about it from the news here at Scotland at 7 this evening. Just to remind you that we are having a major crowdfunder just now. So if you would like to help Broadcasting Scotland to be there for the most important events of this year, then you can do so by following the instructions on your screen now to become a regular supporter of Broadcasting Scotland, to make an individual donation or to volunteer. That's it from me this evening. So from all of us here at the Scotland at 7 studios, a very good evening to you.
The Catalans, the Basques, the Galicians in the Basque.
independent future for Scotland.
How quickly do you think a referendum can be arranged?
Best practice demands that it should be 6 months.
Just looking at the overall share numbers for Scotland at the moment, the SNP 46.4%.